You're listening to the weekly Dartscast, and now your co-hosts, one-time UK Open Riley's qualifier participant Alex Moss, and the one-time VIP guest of Barry Hearn, Burton DeWitt. 180!
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast, sponsored by Dartwolf. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me as always, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. Hopefully we don't have any noise interference from my friend's dogs. I'm staying at a friend's house this week in Houston. We almost had it during an interview earlier, so apologies if you start to hear barking, but otherwise I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing good, thank you. As you can probably tell from my voice, a little bit knackered after what was a very busy but very enjoyable weekend in London for the Viking Cup, which took place yesterday when we were recording at the O2. A brilliant day and great to be part of it. And I've now got an unofficial FDI ranking, although our friend of the show, Lendl, informs me I have to have played 25 games for it to be official. So I'm going to need to play in more tournaments, I think. But yeah, Burton, did you manage to catch any of my 10-minute thriller on Dart Connect yesterday?
I saw your wonderful scoring visit of 10.
Well, the visit before that, though, the 140, we've got to give that a mention, haven't we? I did get as far as the second round, which when I told people that, they said, oh, well done for getting past the first round. But I'll be honest, I did have a bye, so keep that part of it quiet. But yeah, the second game was a lot harder, and the chap that I played, George Willits, will give him a shout out, who ended my run. Yeah, he was too good for me, and he ended up making the last 16, so he done pretty well that day, and I think he was in the top 40 of the overall averages, so it's always going to be tricky, my 47 average, to compete with that. 140, a few good scores in there, so I was happy I didn't completely stink the place out. But let's get into the show, and we've got two guests calling in. You'll hear from Mr. It's Time for the Darts, Dan Dawson.calls, and fresh from winning his spot Ali Pali via the Central and South America Qualifier recently, Diogo Portela joins us as well. But we'll start off with a look back at last week and some much better darts than I could dish up, and we'll go to Barnsley, where we had 4 Players Championship events, and we've got a new winner on the Pro Tour, Josh Rock, winning the last event of the weekend. And it brings us to our question of the week: where will Josh Rock be ranked this time next year? The options are top 16, top 32 or top 64. What are you going with?
It's a brutally difficult question because all of it comes down to how does he do in the televised events? And I'll get to answering it in a second. But his winning the title is the most unsurprising thing that's happened this year. I know I've said it, I'm pretty sure you said it, but it was just a matter of time before he did go all the way and lift a title. What he's been doing this year on the floor, and recently when we started to see him play more on the European Tour on the stage as well, is something that very few people have done. That's why he's now up to number 2 in the FDI rankings as things currently stand, behind only Michael van Gerwen. If anything, he looks a better player, at least on the floor right now, than MVG has been, and arguably at least on par with him on the stage. But we haven't seen him play a long-form match. He didn't qualify for the World Match Play. He didn't qualify for the World Grand Prix. He hasn't had to play any of those longer matches. Yes, the semifinals was best out of 13. The final was best out of 15. And he showed that he can keep up his standard and play at that 103 that he was averaging across the day, even when he's playing a slightly longer match. But it becomes something different when you're doing that right off the bat. Best out of 19 like you would, or best out of 18, since you have to win by 2 clear legs in the first round of the World Match Play. And at the World Championships, best out of 5 sets, which means you're going to have to win at least 9 legs to get out of the first round. So how he plays in front of a big crowd in a longer form match is still a question. But there is no doubt that he has the game to do it. It just is that experience of bringing that game to the big stage over a longer format that he doesn't yet have. But when the year started, he didn't have the experience of playing the Pro Tour. He didn't have the experience of playing the best players in the world, even over best out of 11 legs. And yes, it took him some time to get results, but it did not take him any time to be averaging ton plus. He kept going out with those ton plus averages earlier in the year. So he was raising eyebrows, but not getting the results to back it up. Now he's getting both. And I think he really is the real deal. That number 2 ranking in the FDI rankings doesn't seem too far-fetched. He really is playing better than anyone else right now, other than maybe Michael van Gerwen, Gerwen Price, and Peter Wright and Damon Hedda. There's a few people at the very top of the game who are able to match him and exceed him at times, but that's it. I think he's already on pace to be top 64 by the end of the year, probably top 48, even if he doesn't go and make a run in any televised event. I think he will, draw dependent, make a run somewhere, whether that's the Players' Championship Final, whether that's the World Championship, whether that's the beginning of the year at the UK Open. It's going to come. And all it's going to take is a couple of those deep runs to suddenly see him become not just top 32, but ease in towards the top 16. I think he has a major championship or a runner-up in him in the next 12 months in a ranking event. Therefore, I'm going to say top 16. There's no doubt he's one of the 16 best players in the world. Right now, I would say he's one of the top 8 best players in the world. The question is, will he get that result on television that's needed to draw him into the top 16 by then? I am going to say yes. So I'm going top 16, and he's not stopping there. If he keeps progressing, if he keeps playing at this level, and if his confidence doesn't get dented, which I don't think it will if it didn't get dented by the fact that he kept losing with a ton plus average for half this calendar year. It's just a question of how high up does he go? Top 8, top 4, neither of those would surprise me right now.
Looking at how the poll is going at the moment on our Twitter, we've had over 300 votes already, so thanks to everyone that's voted so far, and it is open for the rest of the week, so go and have a vote, have your say on where you think Josh Rock will be ranked this time next year. And at the moment, 29% of you going with top 16 like you are, 64% going with the top 32 and 7% going with the top 64. And a few of our listeners have tweeted in as well, David Gannon, saying if he has a good run at the Worlds, then I see no reason why he can't be in the top 16 by then. We'll have had that experience on the biggest stage in darts, ready for other majors like the match play next year. And Daniel Bent also saying top 16 by the final of the World Championship. So, yeah, whether he makes that step into the top 32 or the top 16 is going to be how he fares in the TV events, isn't it? Because that's where we're now going to see him. And we've seen so much of Josh Rock this year in the Players' Championships, in the Euro Tours. This kind of hard to believe that this week at the European Championship, that will be his TV debut. He played the UK Open earlier this year, but that was in the multi-board room, and I remember being in there for his game with Damien Mull, where he looked in a good position to go and win that game, but missed match darts and ended up losing 6-5. But that was probably one of only a few disappointments that Josh has had in this first year on the tour, because, as you say, right from the first weekend, he's been posting big averages, 100-plus averages, and at the beginning, the results didn't come with it, but we've seen, as the year's gone on, he's continued to perform at that high level, and he's started ticking off a lot of milestones, having deep runs on the floor, the Euro Tour, and the next step on that ladder was getting to his first Pro Tour final, which he did on Thursday, losing out to Dave Chisnell. And then 3 days later, goes one better, wins the last Players' Championship of the week, beating Luke Humphreys with that 108 average in the final. And Redbit180 on Twitter said that the tournament average that Josh had, the 103.23, was the 7th highest tournament average by a winner of a Players' Championship since Dart Connect came in. So he's in very good company there. And John O'Shea, we've had on the show recently, he said that Josh is an old head on young shoulders, still only 21, but he's quickly making a name for himself. And yeah, I'm interested to see how this next step of his career this first year is going to go, because he is going to be playing in a lot of TV events coming up now, and he's had Euro Tour experience with the cameras, with the crowds, but I guess the stakes go up, don't they, with the TV events, because there is more money on the line, there is more eyes on you, and we'll see how he copes with that over the next few months. But given how he's crossed every single challenge so far, every single hurdle, you'd expect him to be top 32 minimum this time next year. Top 16, yeah, he's going to need some deep runs on the TV, so I'm going to hold back off that for the moment, but we'll see how he gets on in these TV events coming up. But yeah, top 64, he'll probably have that by this time next week, but top 32 I think is a safe bet. But he is one of the hottest properties in darts in the PDC at the moment, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
No, we'll be remiss not to talk about some of the other winners this past week. Damon Hedda and Dave Chisnell following on in their recent Euro Tour titles by winning on the floor. But Rob Cross, who still has somehow never won on the European Tour, despite about 1 billion runner-ups, was the other winner this week. Do you think that, as things stand, Rob is on track to get back in the Premier League after narrowly missing out this year?
Yeah, it's always good to get a Rob Cross appreciation minute in the show, and it is an interesting one because the Premier League debate, it is going to be hotting up as each week passes now, more and more TV events taking place. And this weekend, the European Championship, Rob Cross, he is the defending champion, won it last year to become a 4-hit wonder. beat Michael van Gerwen in the final to win it for the second time, but that wasn't enough, as you mentioned there, to get in the Premier League this year. Missed out, and we saw that the number of players, it dropped from 10 to 8, and of course Rob was eliminated from the Premier League in these last 2 years, 2020 and 2021, which mustn't have helped his chances. But I think not being in the Premier League this year has given Rob a bit of hunger back, and he's gone back to that schedule of his first year on the tour, 2017, when he wasn't in the Premier League, and he was playing all the Pro Tours, the Euro Tours, and getting in the TV events. And look at what he's done this year. Look at how many finals he's made on the Pro Tour, 3 on the Euro Tour. He's won 2 Players' Championships now as well. And you look at Darts Oracle, he's already won as many games as he did last year, and we've still got 2 more months to go. So he's in a fairly good position. And the run that he had to the title on Saturday, the 110 average to beat Callum Ridge, and then, okay, the final, it dropped to a 94, but some of the highlights in that final, the 164 finish, the 160 finish, then the 162 to leave 143, which he took out as well. So there was some very special stuff there from Rob Cross, and 2 titles for the year now. But I think you'd say the thing that's probably holding him back from being firmly in that Premier League debate is a deep run in a major, and we're possibly setting him up for one now, because every time people start to question Rob Cross's form, in particularly in the TV events, he has a dry spell, goes out early regularly, then pops up with a final or with a title, goes all the way like he did 12 months ago in the European Championship. So, yeah, I think the thing that's probably holding him back at the moment is that run on TV, and he's probably going to be in the Grand Slam. It'd be unlikely to see him miss out now, but yeah, we'll see him in everything now for the rest of the year. And you mentioned it last week or the week before, that the post-World Championship Order of Merit, Rob Cross currently 5th on that list. So he's a fair whack behind Michael Smith for that 4th spot, something like 120, 130 grand. But if he goes and wins one of the major titles, then he could be in the top 4, and that would be enough to get him back in the Premier League. So, yeah, I think we need to see Rob Cross do something in the TV events coming up. But like I say, I think he's overdue a run on TV, and this time of year, it is the perfect time of year to do it as well.
Yeah, I agree. What you said there, that the one thing that's missing that is going to make the big difference is that big run on television. Or at least we think so. Obviously, he only went and won the European Championship 12 months ago, and it still wasn't enough to get him in. But he also didn't have the rest of the CV over the course of the 2021 season that he's had this year. He's made the trio of Euro Tour finals. He's won multiple titles on the floor. His overall average this year, according to Darts Oracle, is the 8th highest, and just a fraction of a point behind Luke Humphries, who's won 4 Euro Tour titles this year, and Michael Smith, who are in 7th and 6th. So he's, playing in a top 8 standard. If you look at averages, he's winning titles on the floor. He's making deep runs on the European Tour. The only thing missing right now is that big run on television. And if he gets that, he will be in the Premier League. He might be in the Premier League anyway, depending on how things stand out. But that does get back to what we talked about last week, which is that with only 8 spots on quite a few players who've already gone on deep runs in television events, either winning them or making finals, it will be tough for Rob Cross to get in if he's not able to do the same, which is either win or reach the final of one of the remaining events, or maybe make the semifinals of the World Championship. Maybe a couple semifinals and other events can cumulatively add up and get him in. But he's going to probably have to make a final or at the World to make the semifinals to get in, because you still have Michael van Gerwen, you still have Peter Wright, you still have Gerwyn Price, who are going to be in regardless. There's going to be someone who's going to be number 4. That race is more wide open. It could be Michael Smith. It could be Luke Humphries, the way things are going right now. There's a lot of players who could, and that person will obviously get in automatically. But beyond that, Luke Humphries is in that conversation to be in next year. Johnny Clayton, he hasn't had the same success in ranking events as he's had in non-ranking events, but that didn't stop him getting in the last couple of years because, he won those non-ranking majors. You also have Danny Noppert, who won the UK Open. So there's a lot of players in that conversation, which means I think Rob Cross still needs to do something in one of the remaining televised events. But he has been threatening, and he's looked like one of the 8 best players in the world over the course of this year. So I think he has the inside track. I think he's playing at the level that's needed for him to steal one of those majors or make a final in one of those majors to get back. So in that respect, he is on track. He's playing at that level and putting together overall the background CV that he needs. But he needs as well that big major triumph or final appearance, which he hasn't had yet that year, to get him in. On track, yes, but still with work to do.
Now move on to our first guest on this week's show. He is the reigning weekly Dartscast commentator of the year. Here's our chat with Dan Dawson. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Mr. It's Time for the Darts and the two-time reigning weekly Dartscast commentator of the year, Dan Dawson. Dan, thanks for the time as always. How are you doing?
Very well. Pleasure to be with you again, lads.
Thanks for coming on. It's been a busy year for you with the PDC getting back to its full schedule. You've been to lots of different countries, but how good was it to be back at the Barnsley Metrodome for those 4 Players' Championships last week?
Yeah, it was really good. It's always quite interesting when you have those races for major tournaments and they all start reaching ahead, or reaching a climax, if you like. But there's the added thing about people trying to get to the World, people trying to keep tour cards. So everywhere you look, you've usually got a story of some kind. There's something to play for pretty much everybody on the tour, and even players who aren't on the tour are there trying to get on themselves. So yeah, there's lots of stories to tell. So yeah, it makes it interesting. At the start of the season, yeah, you're always looking to see who's playing well, who's in form. You're getting a look at new players or whatever. But we've been watching them now knock lumps out of each other for the best part of the year. And now it's getting down to the nitty-gritty about who's going to be doing it next year and who's going to be at some of the biggest tournaments in the world.
Well, one of the stories we have to touch on is a player who won one of those events last week, Josh Rock. What a first year he's having on the tour. You've seen a lot of him as a commentator on the ProTour streams this year. What have you made of his emergence so far?
No, I think it's very clear we're looking at the emergence of a very, very special talent. He looks completely fully formed from the first moment he walked through the doors. In fact, even before that, we saw him at Q School. I was there watching him and interviewing before he even got his tour card. And you could see this lad's got something, but I didn't realise how good it was until the first few weeks of the tour. And then it's not died off. If anything, he's just added more impressive feats every single time we see him. And while he hasn't picked up the weight of titles that Rob Cross did in his debut year, they are of a different order. I know Rob Cross had played at the UK Open and he'd basically won the Challenge Tour to get on the tour ahead of his debut year, but it was still completely different from anything we'd seen before with the likes of Raymond van Barneveld's debut year. Of course, he was a multiple world champion, or Glenn Durrant coming over. He was a multiple world champion. But the fact that Josh Rock has appeared out of a clear blue sky, nobody had heard about him at the start of the year, and he's doing what he's doing on such a consistent basis. I think everybody is entitled to be pretty excited about what it could lead to. I don't like piling pressure on young players, but it's very clear that this lad's got a world-class talent and he's going to be playing at the very top of the game. So if he's going to be doing that, he's going to have to get used to the pressure.
Well, let's circle back. We last had you on the show in April, so a fair bit to catch up on, starting with yourself. We heard you in the commentary box for Sky Sports during the World Cup in June, a debut for Sky Sports. What was it like getting to commentate on their broadcast?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a good tournament as well, the World Cup, but getting to commentate alongside Wayne, particularly, who, I'd done a bit of work with prior to that. But it was great. I've been working in darts for a number of years now, and even before I started properly working in it, the pinnacle would always be to get to Sky and be a commentator for them. So to get a chance to do it was a privilege and a fun one as well. So I'm going to be doing work at the Slam as well. I'm hoping I'm going to be at the World Championship. So yeah, I'm enjoying the opportunities, just trying to make the most of it.
Good to hear. And yeah, we were going to ask if you had any more gigs coming up with Sky, which you've answered that for us. So we'll move on to what other work you've been doing with the PDC as well. You're back on the podcast scene as well with some episodes, long interviews, then some others with a range of interviews topics as well. How have you found that so far?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not coming to take your crown. Don't worry about that. So it's good. I think there's room. There's enough space. Darts is still a very niche sport, and as you lads all know, no matter how great the work you end up doing is, you're still talking to a pretty limited audience. So we're not exactly going to end up being Joe Rogan here, but there is still stories to tell and important ones to tell as well. And they're the ones that I've bang this drum loads of times. There's very little room in the TV productions to actually show the personal sides or the characters or much of the players. There's just not that much time. There's an awful lot of darts to cram in there. If you go and watch 8 hours of darts on, a double session, then most of it will be people throwing at the board. There's very little time in between. Compare that to the football, where you've got an hour and a half game and there might be 3 hours of build-up and 2 hours of dissection. There's lots of stuff you can do with that. It's not like that with darts. It's just bang, bang, bang with all the action. So it needs that space to tell those stories and to bring those characters to life, and so people can actually understand them, know a bit about them, empathize with them, root for them, and that's kind of what things like your podcast and what we're trying to do. So yeah, it's interesting. It's I think it's going to give a platform to players who don't normally have platforms, and some of those guys they've got really interesting stories to tell. So I mean, that's the whole point of it, as well as the fact it'll pass an hour if somebody's listening to it and they're stuck on a train, they've got nothing better to do, then hopefully they can listen to Rod Harrington or whoever just drone on about darts for an hour, and it makes the journey go a bit quicker.
Good times. Well, I must say I enjoyed the chat that you had with Chris Mason a few months ago, and we spoke with Chris quite recently and mentioned that interview when he went into detail on his time in prison, and discussions like that we don't often see from the PDC's media channels. But have you got any guests in the pipeline that you're looking forward to?
I think we've just had one. I don't know if has the Russ Bray one gone out. I think that has gone out, and we did those on the same day. And to be able to sit down and talk with Chris, who's obviously had an awful lot of stuff happen in his life, and not all of it great, and then speak to Russ, who, the man has lived 1,000 lives. He's done all kinds of things. He's got fascinating stories. That could have gone on for 4 hours with the amount of stuff that Russ has done. But there's two examples there of people who have made their names in the sport, who have had such vastly contrasting experiences in it, and they've done and seen and been involved with just genuinely interesting things. And that's the beauty of being able to do long format interviews. You go, even if you go and interview a player at a TV tournament, or even on the dart show or whatever, what are you going to do? You're going to get a 2.5 minute piece where most of it is like, oh, who are you? Where have you come from? How'd you get into darts? What are you doing next week? Oh, well, best of luck. That'll be about it. So being able to do something slightly more meaty, a bit longer, and then that does sort of help bring these characters to life. And it is a game full of characters. It always has been. It's one of the reasons that people like darts. They're normal people who do extraordinary things in the sport, and many of them have done extraordinary things outside of the sport as well. So yeah, that's they're the ones we've got or just come out with Chris and Russ. I'm not sure if we got lined up. I think we're doing a couple at the Slam. We might be doing Rod Studd, who is always a very interesting man to talk to, but I don't know who the other one we've got lined up. And when we intersperse them with the regular sort of podcasts, which are very much sort of updates from what's going on in the sport and little brief chats with some of the players involved. But in terms of long format ones, I believe we're doing Rod Studd. I'm not sure who else we've got lined up, but I'm sure we'll find somebody. There's loads of characters in the game.
Maybe it could be Scott Rand if you play your cards right. That would be one.
Well, if anybody can find him, Alec, who knows where he is? We don't know. But yeah, I mean, there might be a massive whole Netflix series about finding Scott Rand, and we can go travelling the lengths and breadths of Warwickshire to see where he is.
Well, this year we've also had the full Euro Tour season again with 13 events, which I'm sure you've been delighted to see. What have been your standout moments from this year's Euro Tour?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, just having the full calendar back is brilliant. I mean, I love those events. As you know, I drone on ad nauseum about how great they are, but having them back and on a regular basis, it allows those stories to develop. Watching Martin Lukeman come through and establish himself completely changes his outlook on the professional sport in the space of less than 12 months, and primarily using the Euro Tour to do it. That's changing his life. It's great watching somebody you've already mentioned, Josh Rock. We knew he was throwing world-class stuff in the floor tournaments. What's he going to be like on stage? Well, it turns out exactly the flipping same. And he's doing that live on telly, on Sport 1, national German telly. He's doing it on DAZN all across Europe. We went to Belgium, and that is the first tournament I've ever been to in Belgium where it's felt like a massive deal. We've had the European Championship there. We did have a Euro Tour there before COVID times, of course, but it was only the one in Hasselt. But going to Visa was eye-opening. It was absolutely brilliant. The organisation of it, everything. They had a hype man on in between the games. The crowds were enormous. Even backstage, everything they'd set it up. It was absolutely brilliant. It's exactly what the European Tour should be aspiring to, and it's automatically gone to right up near the top of the list. If people ask me what Euro Tours should I be looking at to go to if I want to get a taste of it, the Belgian one, whether it be in Visa or elsewhere, and I think we are going back to Visa next year. I don't know why we wouldn't. It was brilliant. Then that's jumped right up there. But, there's Luke Humphries becoming a title winner and a serial title winner. Michael van Gerwen, a lot of people think that he's the best player in the world right now. But, he's won the Premier League, he's won the match play, he's won the Grand Prix. But it all started off with him winning European Tour titles earlier on this year. That's been the platform for him to launch his assault back on the sort of number one position in the world of darts. But there's lots of other ones. Karel Sedlacek's using it to perhaps get back on the tour. We've seen some of the new players get up on stage and show that they can do it there. Scott Williams is another one. But there's loads, there's endless stories. And I think it's been as exciting as I'd hoped, and we're going to have a full calendar again next year where there'll be more of the same. It just always delivers.
Good times. Well, next up is the European Championship this weekend, and Michael van Gerwen, as you mentioned there, he's going to be among the favourites for it, given what he's won this year. But Luke Humphries will be the top seed this weekend. It's a tournament usually throws up a surprise or two, but who do you fancy to lift the title?
No, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I do find it very, very difficult to pick who's going to win any given tournament. There are so many players playing such good stuff. And what I do like about both the Players' Championship finals and the European Championship is because the bracket is entirely decided by how you perform in those tournaments. And when we go into Dortmund, Gerwyn Price is only the number 14 seed. So he's going to be a nightmare first round draw. Is it Roby John he's got? I think it might be. Or maybe it's Madas Razma. I'd need to see the draw bracket in front of me. But there's all sorts of not just incredible first round games, but then the second round ties as well. It's going to be very, very difficult. And so they're the tournaments where you are best. If you are trying to make an accurate prediction about who's going to go and win it, just study the draw bracket for a bit, and I haven't done it yet. That's on my to-do list tomorrow before I head out to Dortmund, just to see who you think can come through what are naturally going to be very, very difficult sections of the draw. I do think that there's the obvious three at the top of the rankings in Wright, Price and Van Gerwen have all made decent cases for them to be considered as the champions, but I like making hipster predictions and outside bets as much as anybody. I don't think you could call somebody like Damon Heta an outside bet. You just look at him. There's a little period in the middle of the year where he wasn't picking up results. He wasn't playing that poorly, but he wasn't picking up results. And he's had a couple of disappointments on the telly. But everything else has been absolutely sublime. And it's only a matter of time before he does something in a big TV major, whether it's the Euros or maybe the Slam. I know he's already won the World Cup, of course. I actually don't think he played particularly brilliantly at the World Cup, but he managed to get it done with Simon Whitlock. So there's loads of people I could pick from. I still think Dirk van Dijvenbode is going to be there or thereabouts in pretty much every TV tournament. Dave Chisnell's roared back into form. Joe Cullen looks like an elite level player nowadays. You could pick 25 players out of the 32 where I think they've got a realistic chance of going and making the quarters, the semis, the final, or even win it. In fact, maybe all 32. There's not many in that field where I think I don't quite fancy it to go really deep in it.
Two of the players in that field that have had a resurgent 2022, Martin Lukeman and Andrew Gilding, after having a bad first year with a tour card. Is there anyone that you've seen this year of the new tour card holders that maybe could do what they did next year and have a big second year?
It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there are. I'm just trying to think. I mean, I got asked a question the other day in commentary about, who are you looking at, perhaps an unheralded player who's impressed you lately who could go and do bits. I've watched Ricardo Pietreczko play for a number of months, and he seems to be getting better. He's moving in the right direction. Not massive strides, but of course he went all the way to the semi-finals the other day on the Sunday in Barnsley. there's a lot of players, if they're moving in the right direction, then that's all they need to keep doing. You look at somebody like Ryan Meikle. Ryan Meikle is not exactly pulling up trees and making people say, that lad's going to be a world champion, that lad's going to be a major champion. But every year he seems to get a little bit better, and he seems to do something that he hasn't done before. Roby John Rodriguez is another one who's made big strides in his career over the last 12 months. We've talked in the past, you and I, about Martin Schindler, about how he's gone from being a player who was, good, but now looks like, he could be a title winner, or he could be a real threat in TV tournaments. I'll tell you somebody who hasn't had a particularly good year this year after a great one last year is Ross Smith. That he's really impressed me in recent weeks. I think he's coming back into some form. And as a bloke who's beaten Van Gerwen and Taylor on TV. Have I made that up? Certainly beat Van Gerwen, I think, at the European Championship a few years ago. I think he's going to be a very difficult draw for somebody, and maybe a few people at the European Championship. While you've asked me a question there, which I haven't given you an answer to because I can't think of anything off the top of my head, I do think that there are loads and loads of players who have the capability to step up and have years like Martin Lukeman, have years like Andrew Gilding. And it puts the cat amongst the pigeons. We talk about the strength in depth in this sport all the time, but they're the examples that you can point to and go, well, that bloke was an also-ran. He was just a member of the tour that nobody was talking about. And he's played so consistently well for the best part of the year, where now you're going into major tournaments thinking, if he turns it on, there's nothing to say he can't go and have a Gilding-like UK Open run to the semis or maybe even beyond.
We shall see. Well, two more before we let you go. And we know that you keep a close eye on darts away from the PDC as well. In an interesting time with the Modus Super Series that's continuing to progress. The World Seniors, they had a call up for the Gold Coast on pay for their World Championship next year, and the WDF yet to confirm any details on their next World Championship. What do you think of it all?
Well, look, there's plenty of darts around, and that's great for darts players. I think it's good for darts fans. The Modus thing seems to be on 27 hours a day, every day, forever. Which, it's a heck of a feat of organisation. Particularly some of the guys who work on it full time. They really do put a shift in, and they deserve immense credit for it. It's given it a great platform to players who don't have tour cards as well to play some competitive action. I think, Robert Owens talked recently about how him being able to play some competitive darts on a regular basis and put some money in his pocket is helping him in his efforts to get back on the tour, which is something that he's now managed to do. So, look, I think that's a massive bonus for players who are in that sort of bracket of not at the top end, but aspiring to be there. I realise the seniors goes on. I've never really bought into the seniors particularly, but I realise there's a niche market there that people seem to like it. So good luck to them. The more people are out there enjoying darts, I think it can only be a good thing for the sport.
And lastly, commentator, reporter, podcast host, MC of last resort, a lot of hats in darts that you wear. And you also do some work for Target as well. Their new launch is coming up on Thursday this week. I haven't had an invite, so I assume it's going to be virtual again, which ends our hopes of a rematch and seeing that blind double 13 again. But have you had any sneak peeks at what's coming on Thursday?
I haven't, I've got, tell a lie. When I was working with them in Belgium, did they show me a couple of little things? I don't think I've seen anything coherent in terms of how they're presenting it, but you do know that with Target is going to be very, very flashy and very, very good. Look, they're proper cutting edge stuff, and I do like what they're doing. The thing I did with them earlier on this year is with a sports psychologist. Now, lots of people have different opinions on sports psychology. I haven't quite figured out my own, but it is symptomatic of what they're doing, and particularly a lot of stuff with their young players. It's not just about getting them to throw darts better. It's about everything. They need to make sure that, or they want to make sure that, particularly a lot of their young players coming through their Elite One setup, which has got a number of brilliant young talents in there. Keen Barry's come through there. Brad Brooks has come through there. Sebastian Białecki has been part of that. There's various other really exciting talents. Nathan Gervin, who could be World Youth Champion, of course, has come through that Elite One setup. It's not just about getting him to throw darts better. It's about making sure that everything is in place so that they can lead happy and successful and productive lives. You know, if you're going into, it's basically going to be your career, potentially, darts. It's certainly going to be a big part of it. Make sure your finances are in order. Make sure you're getting the right support. Make sure that your mental health is good, your physical health is good. All of these things help contribute to, you know, people being happy and secure, and ultimately allowing them to play their best darts. So yeah, it's great to be involved with Target. I think they've been leading the way in lots of things. They used to lead the way in just how you make and design the darts, and they're still way ahead of everybody, and they're still way ahead in how they market it. But they are very, very good at trying new things and getting involved in youth darts, supporting female darts, and just making sure that they've got all the tools they need so that they can just relax and play darts and enjoy it, and ultimately that leads to better results on the board. I think that's a really key thing that might not be the sexiest thing to be promoting in terms of, you know, being a brand or whatever, but I do think it's a really important one.
Well, Dan, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. We appreciate the time and keep up the great work that you're doing, and wish you all the best for what else is to come in 2022.
Anytime, lads. I'm very disappointed we couldn't hear from Burton because he had to mute his microphone because his dog or his friend's dog was yapping in the background. Do you want to unmute it just so we can hear Cooper? Is Cooper still going? I'm really intrigued to see if the dog is still woofing.
He stopped barking about 20 seconds after I pressed mute, though he started again a couple minutes ago.
Well, lovely to speak to you too, Burton. Anyway, say hello to Cooper the dog for me.
Will do. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks again to Dan for joining us. Now, looking ahead, the European Championship is the next event on the calendar, gets underway on Thursday in Germany. Michael van Gerwen goes in search of a third consecutive TV ranking title. He's not won this event since 2017, but is this going to be the year that he wins a record fifth European Championship title?
Yeah, and if you go back to that 2017 one, he was very fortunate to win it that year, because if you look back in the semifinals, Kyle Anderson threw the 9-darter, had 2 darts to beat him, one of which just missed out on the wire in the semifinal, and that could have changed things. And, you know, that really was the beginning of Michael van Gerwen's starting to show some vulnerability. Obviously, you know, over the next couple of years, he continued to win things, but he wasn't winning at that same clip after that European Championship that he just got through. It's taken until around now for him to get back to playing at or near that level that he had been in 2015, 2016, leading into that European Championship. That said, while he might be playing about where he was in 2017, maybe a little bit below, the rest of the field's just so much better. And, you know, right off the bat, his first match is against Chris Dobie. How is Chris Dobie the 31st seed? Well, because it's just that difficult. Chris Dobie's looked like a player who's moving on the up again. He did stagnate a little bit over the last couple of years, but he looks like he's moving back towards being a top 20 player like he had been 24 months ago. And that's the first round opponent who just sneaking into this field, because just getting to the European Tour events is difficult. And if he gets through that, there's the potential grudge match against Jose de Sousa. And you just heard from Dan Dawson. But Dan, I can't remember if Dan said it while we were recording or when we were off, or when we were not recording, but Jose's loves to get revenge on people who say stuff about him. And he's been playing a bit better recently. That's a potential tough match in the second round. And then if he gets through that, look at Johnny Clayton, Gabriel Clemens, Dave Chisnell, Stephen Bunting, all potentially wait in the quarterfinals. Chizzy's won a Euro Tour and a floor title in the last month and a half. Bunting, I really think, has been threatening something big for some time now. Maybe it'll be this week. Gabriel Clemens is back playing near his best, and Johnny Clayton is still one of the 8 best players in the world, and on any given day can look like the best player in the world. And that's just to get out of his quarter. It's going to be difficult. Michael van Gerwen is playing better than he has probably at any point since that 2017 European Championship or shortly thereafter. But I don't think, as I said last week, his confidence is fully back, which is why I think he said those things about Jose de Sousa. It's why he's talking a big game, because he doesn't feel that his confidence, or at least I think he doesn't feel that his confidence is matching the results he's been getting. I don't know why, but it just seems that way. He absolutely can go and win this event. He's the best player on paper in it, but there's a lot of people that, even if van Gerwen is playing near as can and could and very likely will beat him if they also are playing their best. And I'm going to say no. I think he will win another major this year. I do not think, though, it'll be this one.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And looking at this tournament, how dominant Michael van Gerwen was from 2014 to 2017. He won it 4 years on the spin, but as I mentioned, he's not won it since then. And he holds the record with Phil Taylor on 4 titles. 5 years ago, after he won that 4th in a row, you're expecting Michael van Gerwen to have that record by himself by now. But players that have beaten him the last 4 years, Steve West, Ross Smith, Ian White, and then Rob Cross in the final last year, there's been some inspired performances against him. And I remember that Ross Smith one from 2019. Both players played very well in that game. And 2017, that was the last year that Michael won 3 TV ranking events in a row. He's on for the hat-trick again this weekend after winning the World Match Play and the World Grand Prix. And obviously the goal for him is to get back to that world number one. And that spot could change hands again this weekend. I think Peter Wright needs a minimum semi-final run as his money from winning this event 2 years ago. That's dropping off this weekend. So we could see the world number one spot change hands for a 4th time this year, Gerwyn Price taking it back unless Peter Wright has a good run. But as far as Michael, another title on TV, it would edge him closer to those 2 above him and keep the confidence building as we get closer to the World Championships, which is where we could see him get that number one spot back if he goes and lifts a 4th world title. But as far as this one, it's going to be a difficult weekend for him because he's in the same half of the draw as Peter Wright and Gerwyn Price. You've also got players that you mentioned there, Johnny Clayton, Dimitri Vandenberg, Joe Cullen, Dave Chisnall, who's won a few titles this year, Chris Dobie first up as well, and then the potential of Jose de Souza or Martin Schindler just to make the final day. And it could be Johnny Clayton in the quarterfinals, then it could be one of Peter Wright or Gerwyn Price just to get through to the final. So it's a tough looking route to the title, and the bookmakers, they do have Michael as the favourite 5-1, Price and Wright in the same quarter, they're 7-1, and then interestingly enough, Dirk van Dijvenbode, Johnny Clayton, Michael Smith, they're next, and then Josh Rock 20-1 TV debut to win the whole thing. But I'm going to go with you. I don't think we're going to see Michael win this title this weekend. I think it will be to someone else. I think to win 3 of these in a row TV ranking events, it takes some doing now in the PDC, and I may be proven wrong, and I'll hold my hands up next week if I am, but I don't see Michael lifting the title this week. And I think this and the Grand Slam, they're 2 events which have eluded MVG for a little while now. Not sure why those 2 in particular, but 5 years without winning either of them. And yeah, I just think this recent dominance of the TV events is going to come to an end this weekend.
Well, you mentioned there that Michael van Gerwen in the same half as the 2 people ranked ahead of him in the world, Gerwyn Price and Peter Wright, who could meet in the second round, the way the draw turned out. But and all 3 of them are in that bottom half of the draw, which I guess means that you could say in some ways the top half might appear more wide open or more winnable. Don't know if I would say that because of how good Humphries has played this year, especially on the European Tour. But who do you fancy to come through that top half and make it through to Sunday's final?
It's another tough one, isn't it? And a quick head count, I think we've got 8 players in the bottom half that have all won a major title in the PDC. And then the top half, I think you've got 4 of them and 2 are meeting in the first round, Rob Cross and James Wade. Then you've also got Danny Noppert and Nathan Aspinall, 2 former winners of the UK Open. But I look at that top half and there's a lot of names in there who have impressed on the Euro Tour, which is, of course, what got them into this tournament in the first place. The likes of Andrew Goulding, Martin Lukeman, both making finals. Damon Heta, who won the last of the Euro Tour events this year. Luke Humphries, who won 4 of them. So it's an exciting half to follow. And I think with a lot of the bigger names all packed into that opposite half of the draw, you do half expect this to be a weekend where we see someone come through the pack and make their mark in a major event. And maybe it'll be Luke Humphries' time to land that first major. We've backed him in the past to get that breakthrough this year, and as the number 1 seed for this tournament, how does he deal with any added pressure that might bring? And having gone out early in the last 2 big events, the World Match Play, the World Grand Prix, he'll want to do well, and he's another one that he's spoken about wanting to be in the Premier League, and to do that you do have to have deep runs on the TV, and this is the shop window, if you like, to potentially get yourself in that tournament by winning a tournament like the European Championship. And Michael Smith, another one, still hunting that first major title. And this year there's been times where he's looked closer, and he probably has been closer than ever to getting that one, the World Championship, the UK Open, losing out in the decider there. So yeah, again, like Luke Humphries, he's someone that's had a couple of early exits in the match play and the Grand Prix, and Dirk van Dijvenbode as well. He's had some finals on TV. Damien Heta, who I just mentioned, has won on stage recently. So got asked this question on my way to London, who's going to win the European Championship, by one of our listeners, and I plucked out Dirk's name from the list. So I'm going to stick with that. I haven't changed my mind on that. And he's had 2 TV finals this year. He had a final last week on the floor, so he's into some decent form, and I've just got a feeling it could be his weekend. But you could probably go down that list and pick out 7, 8, 9, maybe more of the players on there that could have a run and get to the final. But I'm going to stick with someone who's had recent experience of having deep runs on the TV. I'm going to stick with Dirk for this one to get to the final, and this time round he's going to go one step further and get that first major title.
I think that's a more than defensible pick, and is one of the players I'm considering as well. I'll start, where you started, and that's with Luke Humphries. He is the number 1 seed, but the number 1 seed has not meant that you're going to have safe passage to the final. You mentioned the 2017, the last time Michael van Gerwen won the title here. It's also the last time the number 1 seed made it past the quarterfinals. The following year, Van Gerwen, as the top seed, lost in the second round to Steve West. And the year after that, lost in the first round to Ross Smith. 2020, the number 1 seed was Joe Cullen, went out first round to Willie O'Connor. Last year, Gerwyn Price was the top seed, and he made it to the quarterfinals before Van Gerwen beat him. Granted, in fairness to Gezi, he played worthy of the number 1 seed across the 3 matches, averaging nearly 105, nearly 103, and 107.5 in the match he lost to MVG. So he played at a high standard, but it hasn't been an easy run of it for top seeds recently. And while Luke Humphries dominated the Euro Tour for much of the year, winning 3 in a row, 4 total, he hasn't hit the same heights the last few Euro Tours. And as you mentioned, he's gone out early in the last couple majors, and has a I won't quite say resurgent Christoph Ratajski in the first round, but a Ratajski that is definitely playing better than he was for the first few months of the year. That's a tough matchup, and one that he could very well lose if he isn't sharp right off the bat, especially in a best out of 11 leg match. We also have Rob Cross, who's going to come in hot. You mentioned Dirk van Dijvenbode made a major final not that long ago and has been in contention at many events recently. Damon Heta won a Euro Tour and a Players' Championship just in the last week and a half. Danny Knoppert's UK Open champion. Then there's Josh Rock, who made 2 finals, winning one of them at the Players' Championship this past week. And Nathan Aspinall has also only made a major final recently. And I didn't even mention the world runner-up Michael Smith. The top half has a lot of difficult players. But I just think this is Luke Humphries' time. Despite everything I said, despite the recent bad run from number 1 seeds here, despite the fact that he's not playing at that same level that he was a few months ago, he hasn't needed to. He had done everything he could do on the European Tour to get him in position to be the number 1 seed. He'd done everything he needed to in the Players' Championship events to make sure that he'd qualified for Minehead and has one of the higher seeds there. Yes, he hasn't won on television to that same extent that he did earlier, that he did like last year when he made the quarterfinals of the World Championship, made the final of the UK Open. But that changes now. He is too good, and overall has been too good this year. I think it comes now. I think he makes the final. Does he win it? Oh, I don't have to pick that. I just have to pick who makes the final. So I'm not going to stick my neck on the line one way or another. But I'm going Luke Humphries to make the final from the top half.
Well, let's get to our next guest on this week's show, and he's recently qualified for the World Championship again. Here's our chat with the Central and South America qualifier for this year's PDC World Championship, Brazil's number 1, Diogo Portela. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Brazil's number 1, Diogo Portela. Thanks for the time again, Diogo. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity once again, mate. I'm good. I'm feeling good. Yeah. Although a little bit scary over the weekend, but yeah, I managed to scrap through that one.
Yeah, let's just touch on that to begin with. We're talking still only a few days after you won through the Central and South America qualifier to book that return to the PDC World Championship, coming through a playoff to win it. Have you recovered yet from what must have been a dramatic weekend?
It was dramatic from the moment I actually lost, isn't it? Because out of the whole 5 South America qualifiers I've played, this year was the year I felt most confidence. I had been playing really well. I had been playing really steady darts, not like amazingly good, but very good, solid darts. I've won a few competitions in the UK before I went there, and I was feeling actually really, really good. I felt kind of untouchable, but when I got there, something happened and my game didn't show up. I was talking a little bit numbers. I was barely average 80. I don't know what happened. I was feeling good. I was throwing good darts. It's just not going in. But yeah, after winning the first day, even after a tough match in one of the rounds, I felt that no one would ever touch me again. I didn't want to get to that point, that 5-0 again. And it happens, and I end up losing the deciding leg. And from that moment, that scared me, because I never felt better. I never felt more confident before, and it still it wasn't under my control anymore. And that's the biggest problem, that from that moment I start shaking. I got really, really nervy. I had to lay down in my room because my pressure went down. And I never felt that before. I think that's because it wasn't under my control, isn't it? And at some point, at some stage, both finals, the both guys that I needed to win, they were losing 3-0 down. And I'm like, now, it's just give me one more chance. And I don't know how I got that chance at the end. And as soon as I got that chance, I came back to normal, came back to reality. I was myself again, and I managed to win the final game. But yeah, it was for a good 3-4 hours. It seemed that I was in another world, in a completely different world.
Well, we'll come back to the weekend just gone later, but we'll circle back to when we last spoke, and it was around this time last year, after you'd won in Costa Rica to get your spot at the World Championship again, where you lost out in a 5-setter to Alan Suter. How did you reflect on that game?
Yeah, I mean, the level of the Costa Rican players has certainly improved, even though it shouldn't scare me like it did. But yeah, last year I wasn't playing well, I wasn't confident. I had just come through a very, very tough patch of my life, my personal life. And I think I put a few things right this year. A lot of things that was bothering me, that was in my head, I managed to solve all the conflicts and everything I had. So it was a very, very productive year for me. And of course, going through a few winnings again in the local circuit in the UK, it just gave the confidence I need back, and I think it was a very, very good year. I'm in a completely different spot than I was last year. I've got a very, very good team behind me. I think the best team I've ever had. And yeah, I don't know why it just didn't go my way last weekend, because I cannot explain what happened. Just saying like, it's darts, I need to take on the chin and make sure it doesn't happen again. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, my situation from 12 months ago to this day is completely different. It went upside down. Well, it was upside down when I come back up this year. So I'm really confident. I'm really, really confident. The best I've ever been in my darts career, to be honest. So good things to come, I guess.
Glad to hear it. And I remember after you lost that game with Alan Suter at Ali Pali, you put the tweet out saying that you weren't sure if you were going to go and play in Q School at the start of this year. How late a decision was it to go and play Q School this year?
It was about five days before the registration, if I'm not wrong, or 3 days before the final date. I wasn't gonna go. I was sure about it. I needed a time off. I didn't want to spend money on it. I was really tight of money. I knew I still had the prize money for the World Championship to come up, but it was a very delicate moment for me and my wife financially, and a couple of friends, and to name them if I can, because they really, really helped me. Steve West and Martin Lukerman, they did whatever they could to actually put me in the Q School, including introduced me to my manager now, Steve Goddard, and before anything, he said, even if you don't sign a contract, I pay for your Q school, and when you get the prize money for the Worlds, you pay me back, And thank God everything went right. We signed the deal after that, and it was really kind of all of them, to be honest. And I'm really glad I did it, because point off my tour card, and that was the turning point for me. That was like, okay, I actually did a very good Q school. I didn't need to go to all 3 days in the first section of the Q school. After 2 days, I had already made points enough, so I gave the third day a rest, and that pushed me to the very last moment of the last day, and that gave me confidence to carry on. And not long after that, I won UK Open, one of the UK Open qualifiers, and then start playing motos again. And it was just like I was building up, every single win I had, I was adding up in the confidence pile, if I could say like that. Very good results in some of the WF events, a couple of semi-finals, a couple of very good wins in this WF circuit as well. So I was taking everything on board. I didn't put pressure on me. I was just like, my goal for this year was to bring back to my darts to the level they were once upon a time, now it seems like history what I'm talking about, but I feel I'm nearly there. I'm not there yet, but I'm really, really close. And with the top up, with my confidence that never been that good, I think I can reach an even higher level that I've ever played, to be honest. So yeah, it was a very late decision to go Q school, but thanks to these two friends and of course to my manager to be a really, really nice guy, we managed to go through this year and pick me up, put me back where I belong, to be honest.
Well, you mentioned the Riley's qualifiers as well. You spoke to our colleague Matthew Kiernan after winning that qualifier, and we could hear just how pleased you were. We should ask you, did you get to take the board home with you?
They actually could. They offered me the board. I asked them. They said yes, you can take it. But at that point, I didn't have hands to do it. So I made a decision to leave at the venue the board, because I wasn't driving. I didn't have a car, so I had to get like buses and tube and trains back home, and it would be really, really like difficult for me to carry everything plus my stuff that I had brought to the venue for me for the whole day, So no, I didn't bring the board home, unfortunately.
That's fair enough. Well, away from Riley's, and you mentioned it as well, you've been playing quite a bit on the WDF circuit this year, making a few trips around Europe, Romania, Wales, Sweden, Belgium, to name a few. How have you found playing on that tour this year, and probably playing some events that you've never played in before?
I regret not doing before, because it does help you. It does give you match practice, just it boosts your confidence. You can. I've never played as many darts as I've played this year, because I could do everything. I could do the Motors Challenge Tour, WDF, the ADC. I did every single thing I could do. And before, unfortunately, as soon as I start playing darts in the UK, I nearly got my tour card. So through the Q school, I managed to get in a few Pro Tours, and they used to have how do you call players that used to play the Players Championship. They couldn't play in the old video, now WDF circuit. So because of that, I couldn't do it for nearly 3 years. And after that was the pandemic, of course, so everything was shut down. But I regret not doing before. I really enjoyed. I made a lot of friends. I start enjoying the game again, because it's completely different pressure, it's completely different atmosphere to play, even in a challenge tour, to be honest. That helped me. That helped me a lot, I'm not sure if I will be back in next year, because there is still a few things that he actually, how can I say, because me qualifying for the Worlds, the PDC Worlds, doesn't let me play in the late side. And that is kind of a deciding point which tour I should take next year, because I gave myself everything to the WPF this year, went weeks and weeks away. And even if I manage to get to the lakeside, I won't be able to play, So that's a bit disappointing, but it is part of the life. I need to take that on board and move on. And because of that, I might not play next year again, But I really, really enjoyed it. It did me really, really well. It was really, really good for me, for my personal life, for my darts life, and I regret not doing it before I actually went to the Challenge Tour and Q School and things like that.
Glad to hear it. Well, that brings us then on to the weekend just gone, that World Championship qualifier in Costa Rica, and we should start off by saying that there was a change in the format this year with the 2 events over 2 days rather than just the 1 event 1 day, and the best player over the 2 events winning that spot at Ali Pali. What did you think of the change before it got underway?
I think it's great. I think we should have even bigger in a few years. I think the CDC taking over from last year, they managed to bring a lot into the game, a lot more than we could do, because it's not easy for me to deal with organizing everything from here and also playing darts and trying to help darts in Brazil as well. So I'm only one, and I can only be in one place at a time, and we needed some kind of help, and the CDC came on board, and they've been helping and getting sponsors and bringing great instructor. Like now we have the same instructor the PDC have in terms of the boards and the practice boards and the playing boards is just brilliant. Just because of the PDC managed to get some sponsors and build up new Okies for us, and that's great. And I think in a couple of years' time, we're going to have even more tournaments, and start to expand even more the tour in South America, more than 2 tournaments. I think it can only be beneficial for the players in South America. It's going to be a lot more traveling for me. That's the downside, but I can't be selfish. My goal here is to develop darts in Brazil and South America, and I see that is going to be the future. That's going to be the future. We're going to have more and more tournaments coming up. Maybe not next year, maybe not the year after, but we will have a proper tour sooner or later in South America, and I think that's the way to go. If you want to qualify the best of the region, one tournament is not enough to tell you that who is the best one, and I'm up for it. Let's see what the future brings.
Touching on the qualifier at the weekend, as we've said, you got off to a great start on the Saturday, winning that tournament. The second day, losing out 6-5 in the last 16, and at the end of it, you were tied on points at the top, had to play that playoff, I think 3 or 4 hours after you'd lost in the last 16, but you get the 96 finish to win the playoff 6-4. What were the emotions like after coming through that day and at the end of it booking that spot at Ali Pali?
No, to be honest, I wasn't really emotional. No, I was just like, because I know I might sound arrogant here. I am the best at the moment in South America. They are improving quite a lot. They have improved a lot from last year to this year. We've seen a few players average up around 75 there. It was very good compared to last year, where most of my opponents had a 45, 50 average. So that shows how much they have been practicing, how much they are actually making the most of this opportunity. Yeah, I shouldn't have lost. I missed so many darts at double. A lot of my triples, a lot of my 60s was just in the wire, just like something that it seems that it didn't mean, it wasn't meant to be. But at the end, I managed to put it right. And it was a brilliant final for South America. I mean, Brazil and Argentina, not only in football, but also in darts. And of course, Brazil winning So that was really good. That was something that we actually needed. It would be a lot. It wouldn't be as much fun or as much drama if I have just walk away with 2 titles on the day. I'm not sure if that would help the darts locally. I think it was good. People now believe they can beat me, and it will be even more interesting for next year, and that should raise even more the level that in South America. But I will be more prepared next year, I'm sure about it.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned it as well about working with the CDC, and we spoke about it this time last year, the plans in the pipeline to get a tour up and running in South America. And with anything, these things, they take time to get off the ground. But where are we at now with those plans?
Yeah, we have everything on paper. We want to put it together. We want to put it together with a few other America's competition, like America's Cup and Caribbean Cup. They usually happen like mid-year, so we might put extra weekend ahead of these 2 big tournaments, because on these big tournaments is where most of the countries play. You can have easily 12, 14 countries there with 12, 16 players from each country. So that will be a big, big one. If we can manage to put together a second weekend just before these 2 competitions start, so people can get a little bit ahead of their schedule and come to the qualifiers before the America's Cup and Caribbean Cup. Yeah, and then a second weekend, as we usually do, October time in Costa Rica. That will be great. That will give the players from Central and South America or Latin America another 2 chances, the taste of it, because I know most of the players, they save their money to play the Caribbean Cup, the American Cup. So once they are already there, why don't play the ADC World Championship qualifiers as well? I can only say this. I'm not sure if the planning will go ahead, but it's something that we have been looking very, very carefully to do.
Fingers crossed for that. And lastly, before we let you go, back to you, and it is 2 months until the World Championship. What do these next 2 months look like for you? Have you got many events planned to enter? Any plans as far as practicing, how you're going to get yourself ready?
Yes, I do have a couple of events, WDF events that I had already booked beforehand. I do have, I think I've qualified. I think I've got points enough to play the World Masters, the WDF World Masters as well, at the beginning of December. And hopefully I get another invitation to play Modus, and yeah, that's going to be it. Not much time for much more, to be honest. But yeah, two WDF events, the World Masters, and hopefully a weekend Modus that we'll do. And of course, I'll keep practicing 2-3 times a week here after work.
Excellent. Well, Diogo, always a pleasure to catch up with you. We appreciate the time, and congratulations again on winning through the qualifier at the weekend, and we wish you all the best for the next few months getting ready for that return to Ali Pali in December.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate another opportunity.
Thanks again to Diogo for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with a listener question. Comes from friend of the show, John Thompson, who says there's an awful lot of big names that are currently not in a world spot from the Pro Tour. Who'd be your picks to nick a spot at the PDPA qualifier, barring a late run in Players' Championships 29 or 30? For me, it's Joyce and Bolton, maybe Pietreczko as a long shot.
Yeah, that's it's a really good question, because if you look at the list, like some of the players who are currently out, Ian White, after having a dreadful 4 events, after a while it was looking like Ian White was going to miss out. He got hot for a few months in the middle of the year, and all that hard work he did was erased by 4 first-round exits this past week, and he's now out on countback. You mentioned Ryan Joyce teetering. If Ryan Joyce hadn't withdrawn from the Eurotour, would currently be in, but still right there, but with work to do. Scott Waits is just outside. Jeff Smith just outside. Jeff Smith playing a bit better now, but had a slow start to the year. And then the list keeps going. But I'm gonna say a couple players who are starting to come into form. I mentioned Jeff Smith. I think Jeff Smith absolutely could get it done at the PDPA qualifier because he's playing a bit better now. Florian Hempel. Look, who would have thought Florian Hempel, after the way he finished last year, would be 4,000 pounds out of the World Championships with just 2 events to go? But he's starting to play a bit better now. As mentioned by John Thompson, Ricardo Pietreko has a couple deep runs this past week, has really come on in the back half of the year and will be alongside. But so is another German, Max Hopp, who had probably his best run in a few years with that quarterfinal in Players Championship 27, starting to get some results as well. Ted Evans starting to get some results. But I'm going to go actually George Killington. George Killington's been playing pretty well recently, just missed out on the World Championships a few years ago through the development tour. He was the next alternate depending on who got in, and he just missed out. But he's been playing better the last few months. I think he's going to steal one of the spots. And, I mean, we don't know exactly how many spots there will be, but we know there'll be at least 2. Who do I want to pick for the second one? Is it someone I already said? Or is it somebody else? He's done it before. He'll do it again. So I'm going James Wilson and George Killington to get those 2 spots.
Very good, yeah. It's a very interesting one, isn't it? And you mentioned a few of the guys that I was going to mention there, but yeah, there's some big names that are looking set to miss out on the World Championship, and Ian White is one that you wouldn't have expected. And you go back to this time 2 years ago, the European Championship, and Ian White was knocking out Michael van Gerwen in that tournament and making a run to the quarterfinals, and now he's looking like he's going to drop out the top 32 and he's going to miss out on the World Championship. And just picturing Ian White playing in the PDPA qualifier is something that you would not have expected for a little while. So that's going to be one of the bigger names you'd imagine that could be in that qualifier. A few other players I'll give a mention to, and Steve Lennon, someone who I'm surprised to see is not in that field at the moment, and quite a bit off as well. You look at it, I think he's around close to £8,000-9,000 off the Pro Tour spot. So again, someone that we've seen at the World Championship quite a few times now, and he's had a few good wins on that stage as well. He's someone that needs to have a decent run in the last couple of Players Championships, or it goes down to that PDPA qualifier. And Ricardo Pietreko, who John mentions, and one of the players that was your tips for Q School to get a tour card, probably one of the braver tips that we gave, and paid off because he did get that tour card, and getting a semi-final run on Sunday, the last Players Championship of the week last week, means he's right in contention, isn't he? I think just over £5,000 off the Pro Tour spots. But yeah, I think once we get to the PDPA qualifier, we know the players that are going to be in it. There is going to be some big names in there, and as you say, we don't know how many spots are going to be there. It's going to be 2 minimum. There's that vacant spot at the moment, which the PDC, they've had a few ideas on how they're going to fill it. Is it going to be the pool-in qualifier and they just give him a spot? Or no, they're not sure how they're going to fill that one at the moment, but it could end up being a third spot. And I believe as well, if Josh Rock wins the World Youth Championship final against Nathan Gerben, then another spot would open up as well. You're going to see, I think, 1 or 2. If it ends up being 4, you'll see maybe 1 or 2 players that you wouldn't have expected get through that qualifier, get hot on that final day. And James Wilson, someone you mentioned, he did it last year. That gave him a shot at trying to keep his tour card, but yeah, I think you've had to win 2 or 3 games. But we've seen that on that high pressure day, he's someone that can go all the way and win that qualifier. So yeah, I think he's a decent shout. For me, yeah, I think I'm going to back Ryan Joyce. He's someone that has got experience of coming through those qualifiers, so I fancy him to do it. And yeah, for another spot, let's go with Steve Lennon as well. They'll be my 2, Ryan Joyce and Steve Lennon.
We'll see. Anything else for this week, though?
As always, got to say a big thank you to our guests for joining us this week, to Dan, to Diogo for their time, and big thank you to our listeners as well. We appreciate the support as always, and thanks to our sponsor Dartwolf. If you want more Dynamite Darts content, head on over to dartwolf.tv. Do give Dartwolf a follow at Dartwolf180. And as I said at the start, you can tell by my voice a bit tired from the weekend, but it was a brilliant weekend, and big thanks to everyone I got to see at the weekend. Great to see Andrew Sinclair, Mr. Inside the WDF, a few other guys as well that we had a chat with over the day at the O2. Was a brilliant day, and fingers crossed we'll see the Viking Cup become a regular thing, and we'll get it on next year, and I'll see if I can beat my second round appearance this time and maybe get to the third round and maybe actually win a game as well would be nice. So I've got a year to practice for that. But yeah, until then, keep enjoying the darts, hang tight, for the European Championship. It gets underway Thursday, so not long to wait when this show comes out. Make sure you enjoy the darts.
Hopefully over the next year you can practice getting a couple buys. How you practice that, but I hope you can figure it out. But yeah, just echoing thanks to our guests. Thanks to our sponsor. Thank you to all listening. October is almost over, but it's not over yet. We still have the European Championships, and we'll be back with one. I guess the episode won't be out till November, but we will probably record it in October. So we'll have one more go where we have opulent October of darts. Hang tight until then, and then enjoy the darts. And we'll be back next week as we move into naughty November. Until then, hang tight.